In the last discussion, we had a look at some of the important ingredients of religion, such as spirituality, spiritualism, animism, and so on. We also had a look at memes, a word or concept coined by Richard Dawkins. A meme is an idea, behavior, concept, or style that can be mimicked and spread from person to person within a culture and from one culture to another. Memes are analogous to genes in that they sprout, self-replicate, mutate, and evolve in response to cultural, social, and economic pressures. Money and private property are two memes which have had the greatest influence on our way of life. Marriage, chastity, virginity, etc. are also memes that arose in a social environment in which memes such as money and private property had strong influences. Other important memes are God, freedom, equality, fraternity, virgin birth, etc. Patriotism and nationalism are memes which sprouted only in recent years, and they compete with religious memes for human acceptance and human blood. The romance meme, which forms an essential ingredient of all entertainment, is also of recent origin. We shall now consider the mental environment which provides fertile ground for religious memes. Fear of pain and death and the resulting struggle for survival are the vital ingredients which give rise to all our philosophies, religions, science, economics, and so on and so forth. If there were no fear of death, there would be no life on earth, and no religions or philosophies or memes. Just as our biosphere forms the basic ambience for the genesis and evolution of species, so also our basic mental feeling of insecurity provide the elementary ambience for the genesis and evolution of memes. It is a struggle for survival which forms the basic of all evolution, and in the course of our evolution, our brains got programmed and predisposed to religion, among other things, such as love, hatred, anger, morals, arts, technology, etc. In his bestseller Sapiens, its Israeli author Yuval Noah Harari says that man is a storyteller by nature. This human compulsion to spin stories is enhanced and complemented by our dreams, drugs, and psychotic experiences. Health disorders like epilepsy and our propensity to form patterns also help these forces. The games we play are nothing but war stories. Most animals also play such war games as well as hide and seek and catch me if you can games. There are also stories of imagined conflicts. Consequently, I am inclined to think that animals also are quite good at telling stories, though not to the extent we are. Humor is another form of storytelling, wherein logic, albeit convoluted, plays a huge role. Humor is perhaps the most complex form of logic and storytelling involving many dimensions of thinking. There is another highly critical factor that led to the crystallization of religious memes, and that is the priest. Priests claim that gods and spirits speak through them, and that in itself is a meme. In the last discussion, we saw that the religious or spiritual significance of cave drawings. Archaeologists are of the opinion that shaman, the ancestors of modern priests, were behind these cave arts. We have heard of the famous oracle of Delphi, whom kings and emperors as well as ordinary citizens of Greece consulted for ascertaining the will of the gods. I come from Kerala on the southwest coast of India, and we still have many versions of these oracles and shaman. Sometimes they wear scanty clothes, and at other times they don outlandish costumes and brandish primitive swords and other weapons. They swirl and they whirl and they twirl and roll around. working themselves into a frenzy, often under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Here you have some video footage of some of the primitive religious practices in my part of the world, which is on the southwest coast of India, a place called Kerala. You see these gods, they have, frightening forms with elongated teeth. And here, this is a naked sannyasi. This is a practice in North India, not my part of the world. All the others are from my part of the world. Here you have naked sannyasins. They are sitting around and I do not know what they are doing. They are discussing things. And here a child has been inducted into that practice. In fact, and here you have Ganesh, the elephant-headed god who is very popular in South India. Here you have his brother, is Murugan. He has got a peacock near him. And you have fruit offering to the gods and as well as to the spirits. It's another child. They are dancing themselves into a frenzy. Here, see, the cheeks are pierced, and they often run either wooden stick or iron stick through the cheeks. This self-infliction of pain is a constant theme in most religions, I think. As a remedy for the sins they are supposed to have committed. Our own, the Christian meme of original sin is also another form of this sins committed. Here they are, the cheeks are, sometimes they also pierce the tongue and have the stick going vertical, but they are mostly less than a foot long when they run it through the tongue. They are working themselves into a frenzy with drums. And here are men who are hung up by hooks on their back. Here there are 4 of them or 3 of them hung up. Here 7 of them are hung up on wooden rigs with hooks on their back. They are dancing to, probably to increase the pain. Here they are. Here again you have a statue of Murugan, the god from South India. Now here are dances by oracles. They are dressed up outlandishly and they have a sword in their hands and they dance around. And they sing, this is in honor of a goddess at Kodungalur. She comes into Esteras once in a year, and on that day these devotees come and sing Baudi songs to please her. They get drunk also, and often they wring chickens' necks and sacrifice them, and sometimes they even drink the blood. Here they are, these devotees. I had imagined that with increasing education such practices would subside, but sad to say, these are increasing and becoming more widespread, and lot of money involved also. This is as recent as 2019, now this is a couple of months away. And you have here snake worship. These snake patterns are drawn on the ground, and that see here the girl is wriggling over like a snake on that pattern. Then more of the women come and dance themselves and what do you call, creep themselves, crawl themselves on the ground, as well as working themselves up by dance. I don't know how they get so worked up. For this snake worship, mostly women do the dancing. Men are not involved. There also, I do not know how it came about. And it is at this stage that they are worked up. See, he is pouring coconut oil over her head to cool her down. And it is at this stage that these women are consulted for solutions to problems. Devotees approach these oracles with their problems and are often advised remedies such as special prayers, offerings, or pilgrimages. The devotee then pays a small fee to the oracle or the shaman. Both men and women act as oracles in accordance with the gender of the deity they represent. As societies became more complex, so did religious prayers and ceremonies. Consequently, the illiterate shaman of the Stone Age evolved into more literate priests and further on to more hierarchies of priests such as bishops and high priests. The kings and emperors, who were the ultimate powers in these complex agrarian societies, began consulting these priests on all matters of the courts, such as when to conduct coronations or how and when to set out on wars and so on and so forth. Consequently, these priests became very powerful in the societies, and kings and emperors often kneeled before them for blessings. What is more, temporal powers such as kings were feared only as long as they were alive and had the power to punish. In contrast, priests were feared for their spiritual powers, even long after they were dead. However, in the final analysis, even the Pope is nothing but a shaman in royal attire, making slow and solemn gestures, unlike the shaman who whirls and twirls around in loincloths. We will now look at the dynamics of mutations of memes in general and religious memes in particular, vis-a-vis our fears, dreams, anthropomorphism, pattern forming, and other factors we have discussed already. Anthropomorphism, or our inclination to project our human nature onto animals, things, and supernatural beings of our dream world, was a significant mechanism in our process of spinning out religious fables and myths. The word anthropomorphism comes from two words, anthropos meaning man and morph meaning imitating, and anthropomorphism means mirroring or morphing human nature onto other things, both animate and inanimate. Thus, the fables of the tortoise and the hare, the story of Red Riding Hood, and others come from morphing human nature onto animals, whereas fables such as the oak and the reed and that of the body organs, boasting which of them is better, it also come from morphing human nature onto inanimate things such as trees and body organs. In addition, we morph or project human nature onto imaginary things such as spirits of the dead, angels, and such things. Religion is just a step away from such cases of anthropomorphism of the dead and imagined entities. Religion also involves anthropomorphic ways of propitiating these spirits, dead spirits, such as offering them cash, food, and sacrifices. But the problem is most of these sacrifices and donations end up in the pockets of priests. Anthropomorphism exhibits itself not only at the individual level but also at the society level. Gods of the Stone Age, as well as those of present-day primitive societies, reflect the customs of their particular societies. There was no marriage in the Stone Age and the pre-agricultural societies. Since they were quite promiscuous, they did not call anyone father. In contrast, mothers were held in high esteem in these matriarchal societies. Consequently, mother goddesses such as the goddess Kali in India predominate the pantheon of these primitive and Stone Age societies. What is more, these agricultural societies were egalitarian, and so they created their gods in their own image without any hierarchies. These gods sported primitive weapons in accordance with the weapons used by the societies which created these gods. Murugan, the most popular god of South India, wears only a loincloth and is armed with a bamboo stick. Consequently, he is also called Vel or Vadivel, meaning one armed with a stick, among a dozen other names. He uses a peacock for his transports because peacocks are abundant in the area where he is worshipped. In some agricultural societies with strict hierarchies, it was thought that kings and nobles are eternal souls, whereas slaves are only temporary or transient souls like animals. Then came the meme that to serve kings and nobles in the hereafter, they needed slaves with eternal souls. This gave rise to the meme that all humans have eternal souls, whereas animals do not have such eternal souls. The biblical God is in every way another product of our anthropomorphism. In theory, God is ethereal with no body. We can count only entities with definite shape or form, such as apples. For amorphous liquids and gases, we use terms such as 1 kilogram or 1 liter of the amorphous substance. However, God is an ethereal entity which cannot be measured or counted in any sense. So, asserting there is only one God is more illogical than saying there is only 5 air or 8 water, since water and air are amorphous without any shape or form, though far more concrete than the ethereal God. The one God meme obviously evolved in agrarian societies where kings and emperors fought each other for supremacy. In contrast, primitive societies accommodated various gods and goddesses as equals in tune with the egalitarian nature of their societies. The Bible says that after they sinned, Adam and Eve heard God walking in the garden, which cannot be true since God has no feet to walk with. Then there is the biblical narration that Jesus sits at the right hand of God at the end of days. But this does not say how an ethereal entity such as a God can have a right hand or a left hand. Another instance of anthropomorphism in the Bible is that of the talking snake and Balaam's ass or donkey. The descriptions of God as jealous, vengeful, merciful, omnipotent, and so on by all religions are nothing but manifestations of anthropomorphism. The Bible says that God made man in his own image, but evidence proves right the contrary. And that is, man made the gods in his own image through anthropomorphism. It was in recognition of this fact that gods are made in man's image that Xenophanes said about 500 years before Christ. The Ethiopians say that their gods are flat-nosed and black. Gods are flat-nosed and black, while the Thracians say that gods have blue eyes and red hair. If cattle or horses or lions had hands and could draw and sculpt like men, then the horses would draw gods like horses and cattle would draw their gods like cattle, and each of them would shape bodies of their gods in the likeness, each of its own kind. In addition, these gods of the horses and cattle would think and act like, of course, like their devotees. The fact that animals depicted in the myths are only of the local variant also point in the direction of anthropomorphism. Thus, elephants and peacocks figure in South Indian myths, whereas horses and chariots figure in the North Indian myths, such as the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. This indicates that North Indian and South Indian myths sprouted and evolved in different areas of the world. One of the most revered gods in India is Ganesh, who is part man and part elephant. In like manner, there is Anubis of Egypt, part man and part jackal. The centaur, part horse and part human, and so on and so forth. These are also manifestations of anthropomorphism. In these stories, the local variant of the animals only come in like elephants and peacocks in India, horses in Europe, and so on. Similarly, emus and guinea pigs play significant parts in the religious practices of Mexico and Peru. The practice of exorcising evil spirits seems universal, but it seems that Chinese spirits can be exorcised only with Chinese chants and scripts, whereas Indian spirits react only to Sanskrit scripts and mantras because of anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism also exhibits itself in the violence and erotica which abound in the myths. Jesus may have been one of the few exceptions to this. Though Jesus declared that he had come to bring war, he and his disciples seem to have adopted a non-violent approach to their mission. This may have been for two reasons. The first was that the Jesus cult believed that the end of the world was imminent, and so there was no point in violence or in amassing wealth. The second reason for the peaceful approach by Jesus may have been that there stood little or no chance of success in a violent struggle against the might of the Roman Empire. Most, if not all, our present-day religions of any consequences had their origins in agricultural societies which started cropping up around, say, 5,000 to 10,000 years ago. Consequently, these gods have highly hierarchical pantheons of the agriculture age. As a result, the social structure of the agrarian pantheons also took on more complex hierarchies, with the kings of gods such as Jupiter and messengers such as Mercury in the Greek myths. There are similar hierarchies even in India and elsewhere. These gods of the agricultural age live in palace-like environment of the kings and queens of that age, with a hierarchy of officials such as messengers. Some of these pantheons had concubines like the Apsaras of India and the Houris of Islam. In the Indian myths, gods use these Apsaras to seduce others who pose a threat to the gods. These gods of the agrarian age also favored caste, slavery, subjugation of women, and other social institutions in tune with the practices of the societies which created these gods. The institution of marriage and the stress on the virginity of women are also vestigial memes that sprouted and flourished in the religions of agrarian societies as men subjugated women. Anthropologists think that religions are excellent indicators of the beliefs, practices, and customs which created and nurtured these religions. An article in the Encyclopedia Britannica on religious beliefs in Africa says, in general, these religious beliefs are broadly compatible with the type of society in which they are found. So, there tended to be complex pantheons of gods in hierarchical and stratified kingdoms such as Dahomey. In contrast, small-scale, stateless, nomadic societies lacked that kind of complexity among their deities. Here we have societies living side by side and yet having stratified system of gods in one society and classless gods in another, reflecting the practices of the two societies. It is no different in many parts of India even to this day. The agrarian myths such as the biblical and Vedic myths narrate God sending messengers to Muhammad in the Quran and to Mary in the Bible. Like the kings and emperors sending messengers. Unlike kings and emperors, God is said to be quite omnipresent. Consequently, God was there next to Muhammad or Mary as they prayed in their respective places. If so, why did God have to send a messenger when he could just as easily have delivered the message himself to Mary and Muhammad, as the case may have been? It is also quite strange that God sent the same messenger Gabriel or Jibril to Mary and Muhammad, though they were both separated from each other by large tracts of time and space. It is obvious that here that Muhammad borrowed the Christian meme of Jibril to serve his ambitions. God is believed to have created right into our genes in the genes of all animals the qualities needed to sustain ourselves. Thus, no one has to teach monkeys and squirrels how to climb trees. Similarly, we have built right into our genes all the qualities required to live in human societies, including moral codes. If the Creator could have done all that, He could just as easily have injected or introduced the right religion into our genes instead of humans shedding so much blood over who is the right God and which is the right religion. Real life history also influenced these myths due to anthropomorphism. Thus, in the Indian and Persian myths, there are Devas and Asuras who are equals and at war with each other. But the Indian myths paint Devas as the heroes and the Asuras as the villains, whereas in the Persian myths, the Asuras are heroes and the Devas are the villains. Obviously, Indians and Persians evolved from two powerful ancestors who were closely related and who were ever at war with each other for scarce resources. It is safe to assume that our illiterate Stone Age ancestors who lived tens of thousands of years ago had their share of dreams which gave rise to the genesis and evolution of superstitious and extra natural memes. The cave paintings which they left 40,000 or more years ago in different parts of the world as well as at their burial sites are manifestations of such memes. Though totally illiterate, our Stone Age ancestors were as adept at telling stories as we are. These stories involving dreams and other factors began to sprout and spread and mutate as they passed from mouth to mouth and from generation to generation, and especially from mothers to gullible infants. Apart from anthropomorphism, another significant factor that contributed to the genesis and mutations of memes is what is called entropy or fidelity losses in communications. We communicate with each other in words, and more than 95% of the words we use are either for abstract memes such as democracy, beauty, etc., or for common names such as God, furniture, boys, books, etc. We also use adjectives like big, small, red, hard, etc., which are relative and have no absolute meanings. The only words which are reasonably unambiguous and concrete in meaning are proper nouns and words representing numbers in combination with things such as measures, meters, etc. Consequently, except for mathematical equations, the sentences we use in every day for communication do not have exact meanings and are highly prone to different interpretations and fidelity variations. Such variations in fidelity in communications are called entropy losses. Yes, entropy losses in communication. These fidelity losses became even more significant in translation from one language to another. Due to this loss of fidelity in retelling stories, the myths our ancestors spun went on mutating and evolving endlessly. The Genesis talks of the story of Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit. This story mutated by association to Adam and Eve eating an apple. Mark's Gospel were copied by Matthew and Luke, and in the process, it underwent considerable mutations and resulted in discrepancies between the Gospels. The original Hebrew version of Isaiah 7 14 talks of an Alma or a young woman giving birth to a child. This word Alma for young woman mutated to virgin by association when translated from Hebrew into Greek, giving rise to the dogma of the virgin birth of Jesus. The original Nicene Creed talks of the Holy Spirit proceeding from the Father. This was widely accepted from the 4th century when the Nicene Creed was held. Then, 200 or more years later, some unknown man mutated it, inadvertently probably, to the Holy Spirit proceeding from the Father and the Son. In the first one, he was proceeding only from the Father, but in the second version, Holy Spirit is proceeding from the Father and the Son in what is now called the filioque clause. This and other innocuous mutations or fidelity distortions led to the huge tsunami in Christian politics, which in turn led to the Great Schism in 1054 between the Eastern and Western churches. Cultural differences also lead to mutations and divergences. Most Eastern languages, including my own mother tongue, Malayalam, have no equivalent for the word cousin. Instead, we use words brother or sister for all cousins. Thus, Matthew 12, 46 to 47 and Mark 6, 2 to 3 speaks of the brothers and sisters of Jesus. But these could just as well have been the cousins of Jesus. Similarly, many cultures, including my own, have different words for uncles and aunties, depending on whether they are on the mother's side or on the father's side, as well as separate words for brothers and sisters, depending on whether they are younger or older than you. All this can lead to much confusion during translation of myths and scriptures from one culture to another. No wonder the Bible, with the largest number of reproductions and translations, account for the largest number of bewildering mutations. Paintings, scriptures, and other forms of art are also very important forms of storytelling in the ages before we learned how to write and read. Music is another form of storytelling without real words. Most religions find in music a very useful tool in marketing their superstitions. Consider Da Vinci's Last Supper. It depicts Jesus and his disciples sitting around a table as if posing for a photo session, with all 13 of them crowded on the other side, the far side of the table, and none on the near side. This in itself look vague. What is more, even to this day, the people of Palestine, where Jesus lived, squat on the floor for their meals and feasts. So Da Vinci's painting of Jesus and his disciples sitting at a table for the Last Supper is a work of pure fiction. But that did not prevent Dan Brown from spinning his novel, The Da Vinci Code, in which Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper plays a pivotal role, though it is as far from reality as can be. When this novel was made into a film, further mutations and distortions crept in. The stories, myths, and memes of our Stone Age ancestors proliferated almost uncontrollably, like cancer, due to entropy of fidelity and biblical distortions. But that did not prevent Dan Brown from spinning his novel, The Da Vinci Code, in which Da Vinci's paintings of the Last Supper plays a pivotal role, though it is far from reality as can be. When this novel was made into a film, further mutations and distortions kept in. These stories, myths, and memes of our Stone Age ancestors proliferated almost uncontrollably like cancer due to entropy or fidelity fluctuations and due to diffusions from one culture to another. Biblical memes like one God, resurrection, the last judgment, the story of the flood, etc. are diffusions from Persian, Sumerian, and Egyptian myths into Judaism. Such diffusions and the resulting entropy losses gave rise to many species of superstitious entities like gods, ghosts, devils, satans, goblins, fairies, angels, werewolves, and so on and so forth. Consequently, the same society entertained different myths, and each one had his or her own version of myths which went on mutating ad infinitum. Then, about 2000 to 3000 years ago, man invented writing. Consequently, the myths which were proliferating from mouth to mouth and mutating with every transaction calcified or fossilized into written words, which restricted their free mutation and evolution. This gave rise to the religions which predominate our modern world. Religions which are based on the written works such as the Bible, the Torah, the Vedas, the Quran, and so on. Though these books restricted the basic mutation and proliferation of the Stone Age religions, different interpretations of the same book gave rise to different subspecies of the same religions due to entropy losses and fidelity variations, as well as interpretation differences. The Christian meme that Jesus is God mutated to the meme that Jesus is the Son of God, and further on to the dogma that though Jesus was not the Son of God, he became the adopted Son of God at the time of his baptism. This gave rise to the Christian sect known as the Adoptionists very early on in Christianity. Then there were the monophysicists who asserted that the divine and human nature of Jesus fused into one. There were still others called docetists. According to him, the two natures of Jesus were merely, or rather the human nature of Jesus was merely an illusion. Out of these variant theories about the nature of Jesus rose related dogmas about the nature of Mary, that she was the mother of the human Jesus only and not the divine Jesus. That she was the mother of both the divine and the human Jesus, and so on and so forth. Similarly, there was Arianism and other heresies which were weeded out by Emperor Constantine and others. These two were products of the mimetic mutation and evolution by interpretation, which became extinct in the face of adverse environments. Now, as people become more and more literate, the interpretation of the same Bible and its memes have proliferated, as a result of which we have over 40,000 denominations in Christianity. Mormonism is a new religion that branched off from the Christian family tree, like apes branching off from humans in the process of evolution. The fact that these source books do not provide any evidence for what they assert help in such mutations and evolutions of their memes. It seems we humans revel in gossip and fiction. Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, which is more than 99% fiction and gossip, sold millions of copies worldwide and was translated into most of the languages of the world. In contrast, the factual representation on Jesus' life by biblical scholars such as Bart Ehrman have not sold even a fraction of what the Da Vinci Code sold. Even literary works of gossips and speculation on Da Vinci Code have more bias than any original research work on Jesus or Christianity. This shows the great attraction that fiction and gossip have on us compared to facts based on research and evidence. Such stories and fantasies we spin have a more profound impact on us and our actions than dry and drab logical statements. Before we conclude, it may be pertinent to look into the genesis and mutation of some other memes which play significant parts in our everyday life. There is the story of the apple falling on Newton's head, which led him to the theory of gravity. That no apple ever fell on Newton's head is now very well established. Instead, it seems he came to the theory of gravity after he watched the course of the comets in the heavens. It is not likely that Newton jumped to the theory of gravity immediately after observing the comets. Instead, he must have thought of other theories and discarded them one by one before he arrived at the theory of gravity. The acid test for such acceptance and rejection of various competing theories or stories is evidence. So we can conclude that what distinguishes science from myths is that science has to be verified or backed up by evidence. In contrast, things outside the realm of science, such as religions, do not need any verification. However, in the face of the onslaught on religions by scientific discoveries such as the heliocentric earth and evolution, religions are forced to validate their dogmas by what is called apologetics. But the more they resort to such apologetics, the more precarious their stand appears vis-a-vis science. In conclusion, we can say that spirituality, spiritualism, religions, and gods are all products of our fertile imagination and its ability to dream and spin anthropomorphic memes and stories, as well as in our internal compulsions to form cause-effect patterns in every possible situation. Science is also a product of the same mental compulsions to form patterns. So science and superstitions are like siblings, except that science needs verification at every step, whereas religions and superstitions have no such restraint. It may have been in this context that Einstein said, there are only two ways to live our lives. One is as though nothing is a miracle, and the other is as though everything is a miracle. Unfortunately, the latter perspective, that everything is a miracle or possible, seems to predominate our world. Now that is that. In the next episode, we will consider the Christian religion in the light of the various subjects we discussed in this episode as well as in the last.